Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I know it's always difficult to find time in diaries to join webinars, particularly when it's 15 degrees outside and people thinking maybe a walk round the block might be more appealing. So thank you. We do really value your support and interest in the subject matter that we're going to talk to today. So as I said, we've called this session The Secret to Seamless IT, and it's really not because there's anything clever or hidden going on, but really because for a lot of organizations, IT has slowly become something they're working around rather than something that's quietly working for them. Today isn't really about lots of shiny technology. It's not about big transformations, but it's about stepping back for a moment and asking one very simple question. And that question is, does the way IT work in your business, is it actually being run to help the business move forward, or does it quietly get in the way of the way your business moves forward? And does it create inefficiency in what you're doing and how you're trying to grow your business? Thank you, Paul. So just to introduce myself very quickly, my name's Oliver Lofthouse. I'm the sales director here at Chess. I've been with the board. I've been with the business for just over 6 years. I sit as part of the main board and have overall responsibility for sort of sales and marketing functions across the group. I'm joined today by Paul Gibbons. I'm sure he'll give a little bit of an introduction to himself, but Paul is really our lead consultant around our managed service proposition. He has got lots and lots of experience, and one of the reasons that I'm going to keep my intro fairly short and concise is because I think Paul's insight, his experience, and really sort of understanding what he is seeing in the market through the conversations he's having with customers and suppliers, I think is really thought-provoking, and I don't want to take that away from the session. Between us, we spend, and Paul certainly more than I, but we spend a lot of our days actually talking to organisations of different sizes in different sectors, but broadly, those customers are all facing a similar challenge. And interestingly, what we hear is we don't really hear much about our systems are terrible, they're broken, they need changing, or our IT team isn't good enough. What we hear is running IT and security just feels harder than it used to be. And that's really what prompted the session, trying to create some further simplicity in a complex and ever-changing environment. And I think that's the key thing that we're going to focus on. So, it's worth saying up front, this webinar is not going to be a technical deep dive. You don't need to be an IT expert to get value from this session, we hope. If you're responsible for business outcomes, whether it's growth, resilience, compliance, or delivery, then IT probably already plays a pivotal role in what you do today. And it's there whether you want it or not in the way that you perform your role. Okay, next slide, please, Paul. So we've got a really good mix of customers on the call today. So we've got some customers that have been with Chess for some period of time, so they've been very loyal customers of Chess, and we thank you for your business. And there are others that are have not made the decision yet to move services or take on new services from Chess. So we've got some prospect customers, and we've also got some customers as well that we've started initial conversations. So for the sense of all that, I'm not going to spend too much time, but I thought it's worth just setting a little bit of a foundation about who we are as a business. So Chess is one of the UK's leading independent technology service providers. Really, our purpose is about making IT work for you as a business. We all recognise that you have individual growth aspirations, you really want to drive growth within your business, and actually you're not specialised in IT necessarily. And therefore, what we want to do is to make sure that the IT that you're utilising is really underpinning your organisation and giving you the tools and the capability that you need. We're 240 people strong, all based in the UK, and a real mix of that between sort of core functions in terms of customer support, but also the sort of teams that Paul works within, which are our consultant-led teams. And then clearly one of the things that we do to differentiate ourselves is give you dedicated account management in terms of the relationship you've got. We have about 18,000 customers that are active with Chess today. We are very proud of the fact that over 70% of our customers have been with Chess for more than 5 years and 40% more than 10. So we are really proud and really grateful for the support that we get from our existing customers. And we do have, our turnover is just over £50 million. That doesn't include our security business. So it's another business that's part of the same group called CyberLab. And that was a part of the business that we carved off about 2 years ago that really specialize and focus around cyber services. And we might just touch on some of that as well. And all of those things sort of overlap and intertwine in terms of our offering. At the bottom on the left-hand side, what you can see is the sort of the portfolio of products that we serve. So the way we try to differentiate ourselves is by working with best-in-breed suppliers and vendors to make sure that we're bringing best-in-class products to the market and to our customers. The idea being that what we do is that we kiss all of those vendor frogs before we decide which are the vendor princes that we want to work with. And that stops you having to have multiple relationships or indeed trying to evaluate the opportunities and the options and solutions from different customers. We want to be that consultant. We want to be that trusted advisor that helps us. So down in the rows, you've got the product families that we represent. So across connectivity, services, professional services, security, digital. And then the verticals are just to give you some confidence that we work with customers of all sizes. So whether that's a SME customer right up to enterprise customers with 3,000 or 4,000 employees, we've got a mix of customers right across that base, quite a strong public sector presence, and also strong vertical presence across a number of different vertical industries. We also have an indirect channel where we do have about 200 partners as well that serve and sell services on behalf of Chess out to their own individual customer bases. Just moving on to the next slide now. So I'm going to blow up sort of this is really what we call our sort of go-to-market wheel or strategy or model. And very simply, what we want to do, the outside of this circle is all about the outcomes that we want to deliver for our customers. We want to help make you more efficient, reduce your costs, keep you secure, and unlock your AI potential. You know, it's a really clear buzzword. It's coming into a lot of the technology stacks that we're seeing, and we want to make sure that people are doing that in a structured, disciplined, and controlled manner, but at the same time use the power of AI to really power your organization. The inner part of the circle very simply just talks the way we go to market. So we can be fairly vendor agnostic. You know, I've not got to sell one solution from one provider to you. And that means the consultation that we do with our customers is really important. We spend a lot of time making sure we understand your needs and making sure that we deliver a solution that fits you. We obviously then deliver. We have delivery teams. We also put quite a lot of focus on adoption. So it's about actually not just delivering the technology and walking away, but thinking about how do we embed that in your organization and really make that work for you. And lastly, is about support. So once that adoption and delivery is done, it's about making sure that you've got UK-based support to answer any of the queries that you might have on that in-life journey. Okay, thanks, Paul. If you can move on. So a little bit more detail around some of our solutions. You know, if you are interested in other areas of our portfolio that we might not be talking today, so it might be about device purchase, it might be about mobile technology and the capability there. We're more than happy to set up follow-on calls in those areas. But today we're going to sort of focus in on that sort of IT and security support for your organization. Okay, so last slide before I hand over to Paul is really what are we going to cover from this session today and what might you expect? You know, as I said before, we've decided to run this session because we keep hearing the same themes come up. People aren't necessarily saying that they've made bad choices in terms of their technology or their support. But what they're saying is IT and security feel more complicated. It's more fragmented, and it's harder to stay confident in the services and the tools that they're using. And actually, what our customers want are solutions that bring those things together. So you've got an end-to-end process that manages that IT and security support in your business. And I'm sure Paul is going to talk a lot about the overlap of those two sort of areas of real business significance that customers want to get their hands on. So the reality is, but over time, there are now a lot more tools for people to choose from. There are more suppliers, there are more risks to consider, and there's more pressure. In terms of upcoming regulation and legislation, again, I think Paul will touch on later, all of those things happening all at once. And all of that means is ownership of this solution and this problem often gets blurred. And then, that moment after something happens, when everyone thinks, hang on, whose problem is this? How does this work? Who's responsible for doing what? So today we're going to focus on three key things. So why IT and security feel harder now, why ownership is usually the real issue, and where managed services and IT and almost pulling them together and integrating them as one solution can really add benefit to the business. That's it for me. I'm going to come back at the end of the presentation in terms of Q&A, but I'm now going to hand over to Paul. Thanks, Paul.
Yep, thanks, Oliver. Oh, bear me 2 seconds. There's a new feature called Cameo, if anybody's ever seen it, and it doesn't work seamlessly. Hello. Okay, so to start off with then, I think this slide is usually where people start nodding because it looks very familiar. So IT now is completely business critical. If systems slow down or fall over, people feel it straight away. Work stops, customers notice, things back up quickly. At the same time, risk is moving faster than most internal teams can keep up with. Not because the teams aren't good, it's just that there's more to watch and it never really slows down. And environments are more complex than they've ever been. There's more cloud services, there's more suppliers, there's more systems stitched together over time. But the line that really matters for this conversation is the last one. Leadership owns the outcomes, but doesn't always feel fully in control of everything that drives those outcomes. The gap is where the noise comes from. And once it's there, it doesn't stay conceptual for long. It shows up in very ordinary situations. That's when the questions start creeping in, and usually at the worst possible time. So these are the sort of questions that come up when IT and security start getting harder to keep on top of. They're not technical questions, they're ownership questions. A very ordinary example is someone clicking on a link they shouldn't have. I assume everybody's familiar with that, and it's a general nightmare. So at first, it looks small. Then something doesn't quite feel right. And suddenly the conversation isn't, can we fix it? It's, who's picking this up? Is it IT? Is it security? Is it the provider? Or is it internal? Now that hesitation is what people find uncomfortable. Not because they don't care, but because responsibility is spread across tools, teams, and suppliers. And it's not always obvious who's meant to act. It's tiring for IT teams, and it's also very frustrating for leadership. The key to stay here is that this isn't about panic. It's just a sign that the way things are being run hasn't quite kept up with how much things have changed and constantly change. And usually when people start thinking less about the tools and more about how they actually want IT to feel day to day, which is where the idea of seamless IT really comes from. So this is what people are usually trying to get back to. When people talk about seamless IT, this is generally what they mean. It's IT that supports the business rather than getting in the way. It's also security that's part of the day-to-day working. It's not something that's only about alerts and alarms and audits. And it's the environment that just runs quietly in the background. And that's not because nothing ever goes wrong, because that would be an ideal world, wouldn't it? But because when something does happen, it is dealt with calmly and properly. So when IT feels calmer like that, it's rarely by accident. It usually means there's a sensible way of running things underneath. One that makes ownership clear and stops things bouncing around. And that's the real question, really. What does that sort of model actually look like day to day? So this is a model I keep coming back to. It's something that we've been working hard on in the background to try and get stabilized and make sure we've got all the platforms and everything integrated so it is seamless. But this is what is basically, it's simple and it works. It's a proven concept now, and it definitely works on our side. And it's not really about managed services at this point. You operate. So systems and users are looked after properly at the time, not just when something breaks. You protect. So small issues don't quietly grow into bigger ones just because no one spotted them early. And you recover quickly and cleanly when things go wrong, so the business can keep moving again. And you advise, so decisions are joined up and technology supports where the business is heading, not just today's problem. I think the important bit here is that security isn't separate. The same thinking that answers who's dealing with the outage also answers who owns the security incident. And the real benefit isn't fewer issues, it's fewer pauses, fewer moments where everybody stops and works out who should be doing what. And this isn't about handing everything over on day one. Most organizations already do bits of this, just not necessarily always consistently. Okay, so what I've learned over the years is that not everybody wants to start at the same level of ownership, and especially at the same time. Different organizations are in different places. Some teams are quite happy running most things themselves. They just want someone to lean on when something unusual crops up. Others are getting a bit worn down by firefighting and just want things to feel steadier day to day. And some just want much clearer ownership because they'd rather focus on the business than running IT. None of these are right or wrong. The important thing is the way of working underneath, it stays the same. You're still operating, protecting, recovering, and advising. You're just deciding where responsibility sits at that point in time. And that can change. A lot of organizations start small, they build the confidence, and then they move things over gradually once they see it working. Okay, so, and when responsibility does start to line up properly, this is usually what people notice day to day. It's nothing dramatic. It's not a big before and after moment. Things just feel simpler. There's fewer hands-offs when something does go wrong. There's less time chasing updates. A really ordinary example is, let's say, a problem that keeps cropping up. I don't know, say something like a system slows down every few weeks. It's not all the time, it's just manifesting itself in usually the worst time. So instead of it being logged, patched over, and coming back again, someone actually owns it end to end. So they look at what's causing it, they fix it, and they also stop it being a constant background irritation. So from a leadership point of view, That's often the biggest change. It's not the problems disappear, it's that they don't stop bouncing around, and it's obvious who's dealing with them and what happens next. And when things feel calmer like that, it isn't by chance. It's usually because there's something solid going on underneath. There's a clear ownership, clear ways of working, and people knowing who's responsible for what when something doesn't go to plan. None of this is glamorous, and it's not meant to be honest. It's just the day-to-day discipline that stops small issues turning into bigger ones. Things like having clear points of contact, consistent processes, and teams who actually know the environment they're supporting. I'm not showing this as best practice or anything like that, to be honest. It's just how things tend to work when IT feels less noisy. And this is also where organisations often slip. So they put real effort into running support properly and then treat security as something separate, which is where things start to wobble again if you're not careful. So the reality is, security behaves just like the rest of IT. It just moves faster. A compromised account at 9 in the morning can turn into a business problem by lunchtime. And that's if no one's watching it. That's why running security as something completely separate just doesn't work anymore. It needs to be the same ownership. It needs to have the same disciplines and the same clarity around who does what, especially when something happens. So in this model, security isn't bolted on. It's just the same way of working, extended from keeping things running into keeping things safe. And once you look at that, the next question is fairly obvious. How do you actually bring that in and not turning it into chaos at the same time? So this is where a lot of problems either get avoided or quietly created. Most issues with managed services don't come from the technology itself. They come from how change is brought in. We've all seen it. Something gets switched on, alerts start firing, but no one really agreed who's responding or how decisions actually get made. This is just about stopping that from happening. So this is where it becomes quite ordinary. So day to day, this isn't about dashboards. It's not about clever tooling. It's about how things get handled, especially when something crops up. So most issues still start in the same places. It's either an endpoint or a user. A lot of users nowadays, in all honesty, and there's a few that can definitely verify that, what we know of. But it all starts on something silly. It's usually someone clicks a link somewhere, especially that they shouldn't. The device starts behaving oddly. Something just doesn't feel right. The difference is what happens next. So instead of it being passed around, half looked at, or parked for later, it's picked up, it's dealt with and closed properly, with one clear owner. And if something does escalate, recovery is already part of the thinking, not as an emergency response, just part of how things are run, day-to-day, normal world. So it's not about more alerts at all. That's not what any of this is talking about. It's about clear handling and clear ownership, not having I thought it was you, I thought it was him. There's none of that. It's very clear, very concise, very measured and reported on. And I think the reporting is one of the huge ones, because the new bill that's going to be coming this year, we believe in May, June, that's going to stipulate that you've got to be able to protect and measure the users, but at the same time, you need to report accurately on what happened and how it happened and how you resolved it. So that's where this stuff really comes into its own, in all honesty. So when things are handled like that, this is the difference. People actually notice. The risks feels lower. Things feel more resilient. And there's a lot less day-to-day noise. Not because nothing ever goes wrong. Again, ideal world if that happened. But because when something does happen, it's known to be picked up and it's known to be dealt with properly. From a supplier point of view, there's less juggling. You haven't got all these suppliers to keep juggling, and are they talking to them, and how does that relate to that? And that's all gone with this particular type of model. Also, it is less second guessing. You're not trying to think, my worst case scenario is, and we've faced this ourselves, is when we think somebody else has picked something up, and then there's a realization that they haven't, and then we have to jump on it, or somebody else has to jump on it. The problem with that is cyber attacks, they are so quick now. They're like wildfire when they go. So you need to be able to see something, deal with it quickly, and get the right people onto it within no time whatsoever. And sometimes it's minutes that you need to do that. So that's, again, the importance of having these type of models is that's all handled within the same ecosystem. One platform, one process, two teams. So from a business point of view, that's predictable because it's the usual way of doing it, and that's the real win. That's the big one for me is, you can talk about all these other values that you get from this type of service or from these type of models, but the real one is just having that predictability. It enables people to sleep at night confidently. And once things are running like that, the next question people tend to ask is, it's quite a practical one, to be honest. It's how. How do you do that? Okay, so what we see time and time again is that when responsibility is clear, things become more predictable by themselves. Also, instead of cost and effort jumping around based on individual issues, everything lines up around ownership. And that matters because blurred responsibility nearly always makes that thing messier, technically and commercially. So this approach is really just about protecting the way of working, especially that you've just put in place. If you go through all this effort, you want to make sure that it stays in place. It stops things quietly slipping back into firefighting 6 months down the line. And by this point, most people usually aren't thinking about models or frameworks anymore. They're thinking about their own setup, where things feel clear and where they don't. Okay, so this is just an option if it's useful for anybody. So after this session, I'm offering a 360-minute conversation. It's not a sales call and there's no obligation. It's just a chance to talk through your setup and sense check a few things. So where things feel more complicated than they need to be, perhaps, where ownership might be a bit unclear, and where a small change might take some of the pressure out. So sometimes that leads to a next step, and sometimes it doesn't. Either way, people usually come away with a bit more clarity than they had before. And that's what I do day in, day out at the moment, is looking at current setups and trying to work out where there's efficiencies that can be brought in or where there's some gaps, and it's just filling those gaps, and it's trying to make sure that it's ready for all these changes that are coming, because the UK bill that's coming is very much around you know, they've even said that the user has to be protected as you would putting in a firewall. It has to have the same level of protection. It's also coming down from the supply chain. So you'll have somebody at the top of that supply chain that will be forcing down to all the suppliers an expectation around what their security position needs to be, and it will be legislated. So it's definitely going to happen, and it's going to be a little bit, you know, a bit scary to quite a few people, in all honesty. So what this is trying to do is head that off. When it does come, these type of services, or this model, if you just take the model as a foundation, then that's what's going to be able to head these things off. Okay, so final notes. So just to put it all together just before we finish. We've talked about why IT and security feel harder than they should, how a single way of running things helps, and how responsibilities can grow over time without causing disruption. So none of this is about perfection at all. It's about things feeling calmer, clearer, and more predictable day to day. And in my experience, the most useful part of these sessions tends to be less the slides and more around any questions or any situations that anybody wants to talk about. And these can be real situations. So yeah, let's stop talking about me and open it up. Oliver?
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Really insightful, and thank you for keeping us on time. So, as I said before, if you, or I haven't said before, but as I posted, if you've got any questions that you'd like answering, please pop them either in the chat or the Q&A tab. One of the things that we're going to do, though, is that we have had the chance to speak to some customers ahead of this webinar. So I have already got some questions from the content that I'm going to start off with while people perhaps give me their own. So the first question, Paul, I've got here is, why should I have confidence in your platform? You know, there might be a number of different options and solutions that I might choose. What is your experience and insight that tells me that the platform that Chess are offering me would be the right choice for my business?
Yeah, I love it when we don't rehearse things and then you set me up on these type of things. So I think from our platform point of view, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to turn my camera on, but this cameo thing doesn't necessarily like switching. Feedback to Microsoft. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one for us is we have spent about 18 months looking at this and working out exactly how we can bring this all together into one. And it's not been easy. We've to use your phrase at the beginning, there's an awful lot of frogs that we've been kissing, but I believe we found a really good prince now. And the big one for me is it's the fact that if you've been quite a few of these sessions with me with certain customers, it's with this type of concept, we're not charging in and saying give us everything. That's not what the intent is. We want to complement what the team's got and fill those gaps. But the big one for me is it's a true business continuity type model, because it offers everything from, you know, protecting the endpoint and having that visibility. It also has the fact that it's helping the user educate them and make sure that they don't do anything that they shouldn't as best they can. Yeah. It also helps with, you know, drawing attention to those emails, those situations that are getting more sophisticated all the time. It says, you know, you've never had this email before. It's got a lot of urgency written all over it. Should you be really clicking it? If you're not sure, then let somebody else know and let them have a look at it. The other thing as well is it covers the actual backup and recovery perspective as well. So to me, if you think about it, you can put up as many defense as you can. But then if something comes in, you need somebody to be getting hold of it as quickly as possible. But should that fail, because we can't stop everything, it's impossible, is everybody knows that in the same model, in the same ownership, that there's a recovery point that's been dealt with. And that's really where I think, you know, when we talk about uniqueness or where this really addresses a lot of the general concerns is you're not going out of that. It's all within the same, and you can get the business up and running as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I suppose you often hear the phrase of drinking your own champagne, but just to let you know that this platform is a platform that we've deployed across our business to manage our 18,000 customer relationships. And when we get more into the technical details of the platform, what you'll also see is the platform that underpins and powers this solution. We're talking about a multi-billion-pound organization. So, you know, it is one that is investing heavily and moving forward. So, Paul, just a quick question. One of the things was around, you know, you've talked about people being sort of, you know, one of the biggest threats to our security and our resilience as a business. Just talk a little bit about some of the features that are within this platform that can be there to support education, awareness, training, that sort of thing around people in our organizations.
Yeah, so there's a particular part of the platform that you can actually start. You can do phishing and vishing campaigns, so you can do those. You can either set them up programmatically so they can do it on a monthly or quarterly basis. You can also push out on the fly as such. So obviously everybody will know their own business. So the whole intent of it is you're trying to trip somebody up, not to you know, name and shame them as such, but to help educate them, to keep them on, you know, their eyes on the ball at all times and have that awareness. But what it does as well is if you push something out and somebody clicks a link on that test, then it will show that they've clicked the link. It will show they've failed. It will tell them that they've failed, but it will also push them dynamically training material that helps them to educate so they don't do it again. Then naturally you can follow that up with trying to trip them up again. You know, there's a bit of a gamification in. Now I've actually got a customer, this food for thought is this. I've got one customer that's looking at doing this internally. They've allocated it to somebody and their bonus is going to be aligned to how many people they trip up. So they've got an incentive to try and trip people up. So it keeps them on the ball. But at the same time, the other people that are in the business, they'll start to get savvy with this and try to prevent them from actually getting tripped up. So again, gamification, it's not fun, to be all honest, but at the same time, you've got to kind of do something that creates something internally. We do it. You know, I got caught a few weeks ago by our security officer because I'm a nightmare to deal with. He caught me. He did an absolute cracker. But that's because he knew I was doing something and he followed it up with something I was expecting. Bit unfair, to be honest. It could have been done in a different way. But at the same time, he tested me and I failed. Now I know I won't do it again.
Yeah, good.
So,
and one of the features also you talked, I know you talk about quite a lot, is that the predictive nature of some of this stuff. So in terms of email security, about, you know, banners coming onto emails before people have even opened or clicked, you know, safeguarding people, giving them proactive warning about this is an unusual email address, or it has these certain traits that you need to be mindful of. So I think we all talk about the AI and the way that that can start to develop and help these platforms. But I think that's the sort of thing that's really important, is that we're actually starting to predict and show patterns and trends that try to stop those things happening in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is as well with this, if something does happen, because you've got 24/7 eyes on it, and these are security eyes, which are a slightly different animal for me. You know, I don't have that. I find it boring, to be honest, just watching that type of stuff. But these guys get really excited about it. That's a perfect blend that you've got with this. You know, you've got those eyes that are constantly watching, and if something does happen, they're quite quick. They're very zero trust. They trust nothing, trust nobody. If they see something that's slightly weird, they're all over it and they stop it. And that's I think the real extra value that you get from this as well.
Perfect. Just got a question. You touched on it lightly, but and I'm not going to ask you to give me a number or a pound note amount, but just talk to us a little bit about the commercial model, because you talked about the flexibility, which I see as deciding whether you want to be purely reactive with this platform or whether you want to go the whole hog and be more proactive around the approach. And obviously, the involvement and the depth of integration will be different. Just tell us a little bit about how the model works, though, because we've had a lot of questions about is this a platform fee? Is it a, you know, how does that get charged to me? How flexible is it? That sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two elements to this. One is you still got to have a level of IT services, because remediation, there's a lot of, you know, there is tooling that's involved in this. So there's kind of a prereq that says some of the tooling must be in the environment and we need to be doing something to assist the customer. Now that is shared operation or whatever. There's different ways to cut that one. The actual managed security as a service is based on a per user per month subscription. So it doesn't matter how many devices, whether you know they've got infrastructure that's in the cloud, you know, what firewalls are being used, as long as there's an alert and an alarm that can be set up. And most stuff is cloud enabled nowadays, so that's quite easy to set up a SaaS alert. Then that's covered simply by one monthly subscription of a per user per month. So it's quite an easy model. It's quite flexible. I mean, to give you an idea, it starts at about, for the MSaaS, it's, if you're happy for me to say how much it starts at.
Yeah, of course.
It starts at £14.95 a month. And that includes everything that's I've talked around within that security. It is your full 24/7. It's got all the user behavioral stuff. It's got backup. It's got recovery. It's got a multitude of things. Even dark web monitoring included in there as well. So we tried to put everything into a very clear, concise model that is affordable to the many, not the few.
And that's a really good question, actually. So a question that's just come into me is that what's the sort of the EDR and MDR capability? Because, of course, a lot of businesses see that as a massive overhead. There's probably normally quite strong setup fees, and it is integrated into our platform. So just tell us a little bit about the EDR and MDR capability that sits within the platform, please.
Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, I think the starter for 10 is this doesn't displace anything around Microsoft in particular. So if people started investing in that Microsoft journey and started to get, you know, Defender for Business built into the platform and everything else, this doesn't displace it in any shape, way or form. It complements it. And the EDR and MDR is, the EDR naturally is bot driven, but it's quite sophisticated bots are these now. So although some AI is still in that maturity modeling, the actual EDR piece is pretty mature now. It's been going through that for about 4 years now. So it's learned a hell of a lot, and it constantly learns. The really good value about this is you don't take EDR or NDR, or it has both. So if you imagine somebody clicks on a link, something's not right, a bot will look at that and go, that's not right. Now you can tell that bot two behaviors. One is go and tell somebody in the security team and they can start looking at it. Or alternately, you can say, do you know what? I'm not risking it. I want that bot to isolate that machine. So immediately it will isolate it. Then it will tell somebody in security they need to start looking at it. That's the kind of the real how this flows through. You know, it's not a, oh, you're waiting for somebody to look at it. I'm a human. Sometimes I will study something. It's in nature. I'm inquisitive, and I'm also, you know, because I've got that technical head, I like to think for a minute or so. Obviously, with security, you don't really want to have a think. So the bot doesn't think, it just does because it doesn't understand anything else. Then the human can come in and have a look at it. Now, we saw that with one of the pilots we were running, an actual customer did get into that situation, and it spread like wildfire. It gone to 6 machines in 10 minutes, but then it was containerized. The guys from security could look at it, hand it back to us, and we did some of the remediation. Basically, 2 hours later, everything had gone and everything was stabilized. If we hadn't have had EDR, that bot, don't know what would have happened, because humans were just a little bit too slow with it. So that's the kind of 2-layer safety net that you get with these type of models.
I think the benefit, of course, is that you effectively, by being as part of this community and in this platform, you effectively get enterprise grade EDR and MDR
at an
actually
affordable price.
integrated at an affordable price. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
good. I've got one more question for you, Paul, and this one's going to come from a meeting that we both were sat in yesterday, actually, which I thought was a really interesting question. So you did a great presentation to a customer yesterday, which I won't name for obvious reasons, and at the end of that, the one thing that they said was, look, this sounds great. This sounds, they are already a managed support customer of ours, but the sort of the managed security element was something that they had been working on and looking at for some time. So the one thing they said was, actually, what I need to be able to go to my board to do is to demonstrate the ROI of this, to show actually where those efficiencies exist, why we're going to be more resilient, and why this is a no-brainer for the business. What's your advice and what are your tips to any organization sitting out there today and saying, how do I start that ROI journey? How do I determine whether or not this can deliver me benefit to my organization, even if that's a sort of a start of a 10?
I've got about 6 different ways of answering it based on different scenarios. So I've got one customer that's been given a hell of a compliance journey to go on at speed, where in that supply chain, they've said, oh, you need to be 27001. And they are not cyber essentials at the moment. So that is one hell of a steep path to go on. The other one is, so I mean, that's where we're trying to leverage this to say, to get there, slightly unreasonable in all honesty, for the size of our organisation and the value that this contract is, would this suffice? So that's one ROI, is making sure they can still get the contract. The other one is, there is consolidated costs that you can put into this. There might be a backup solution. There might be some sort of dark trace monitoring or something that's been set up today that has a cost associated with it. So you can repurpose some of that cost. It will definitely help to get these type of platforms and services out there. Another one really quick is insurance companies. They are standing cyber separately now, 99% of them. Now, if you can go to them with something that reduces their risk, a bit like if you're a young person and you're trying to get a car insurance, which costs more than the car by about four times the value, if you put a little black box in, their chances of paying out insurance is just reduced significantly. This has exactly the same look and feel. So if you can go to that insurance company and say, if we bring this, will it affect our premium? And if they say, yeah, well, you've just got some money back, you can then repurpose that to get in these type of services. So there is different ways to approach it, and absolutely different ways. And
one of the things that the IT director said to us yesterday was really is about his leadership time, his management time as well. And you know, we asked him the question about actually, does he feel as though he has enough time to really give this the attention it deserves? And you know, everybody's busy, and therefore, when he honestly answered that, he said, actually, there are times when I feel as though I don't have enough time to be able to devote to that. So I think, you know, there's clearly that management time, and then clearly the value. I think, you know, that's great, Paul. So I'm going to round it up now because, you know, we're 50 minutes in. I think that's really great. The one thing I would always say, though, is quite often businesses need that compelling event. They need the reason to act. And, you know, Paul touched on it very lightly, but the cybersecurity and resilience bill that is currently going through Parliament at the moment, I think is that compelling action. I think it's the difference of acting proactively in almost trying to set expectations about what this might bring and the impact this might have on your business. I think is really important to get ahead of this rather than you having to react to it when that bill gets approved and gets installed. So I think the biggest thing I'm going to say now is, you know, we've done a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. As you can imagine, Paul could probably spend all day talking about this platform. What I think is the really strong offer here is for him to offer every single customer on this call an hour of his time, and quite often more than that because he talks quite a lot, but actually to get into what your business is, what the level of maturity is, what your plans are, what your strategies are, and how this might work for you. And Paul has got a great level of experience. So I would just say, even if it's an opportunity just to sort of use Paul as a sounding board, understand what you've got and how you might be going, that consultation with Paul will probably be really, really valuable. You know, we're doing more than one a day every single day of the month, and we're getting a lot of value out of those at the moment. So please take that opportunity. It's free of charge to you. There is absolutely no obligation, and it will allow us to just tailor the discussion a little bit more to your need. So that's it from me. Paul, I'd like to say thank you to you for sharing some of your experience and insight. I'd like to thank all of the customers and prospects for joining the call as well. I hope it's added some value, been a bit more of a thought provocation for you, and is something that you'd be keen to follow up with us at a later date. So we will be in touch. We'll follow up with the recording of this video, and someone will be in touch to see how you might want to take these conversations forward. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoon, and I hope you get out to see a bit of the sun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.